In the freezing winter of December 1940, Britain seemed untouchable. The skies above London had repelled the Luftwaffe, yet the streets below were scarred with rubble and fire. Smoke curled from shattered buildings, mingling with the acrid scent of coal, ash, and fear. On the map, the British Empire looked vast, a pink blot stretching from Canada to India, from Africa to the South Pacific. Yet beneath this veneer of invincibility, a crisis was silently unfolding. Not one fought with guns or bombs, but with numbers, ledgers, and the invisible force of finance. The fate of the empire would be determined not by soldiers, but by balance sheets. Winston Churchill, the voice of defiance and hope, sat in the underground war rooms of Whitehall. Above him, the muffled thuds of bombs shook the city, but his mind was elsewhere. Not all battles are fought on the battlefield. Some are fought in accounting ledgers and treasury memos. With pen in hand, he drafted a letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was a plea disguised as diplomacy, a confession from an empire that had once conquered Napoleon. Britain could fight Hitler on the beaches and in the skies, but it could no longer pay for the tools of war. When World War II erupted in September 1939, Britain was still a financial titan. London's gold reserves were immense. Overseas investments spanned continents. British citizens owned railroads in Argentina, copper mines in Chile, and factories in the United States. The city of London was the beating heart of global shipping, insurance, and finance. Britain had wealth, power, and influence, but Hitler's war was different. It consumed steel, oil, aluminum, and rubber at a pace no pre-war calculation could have predicted. Supplies dwindled. Imports were blocked. Britain's economy was bleeding cash faster than the Treasury could count it. Across the Atlantic, the United States remained neutral. Isolationist sentiment ran deep. Congress had passed the Neutrality Acts, designed to keep America out of foreign entanglements. Britain could purchase arms, but only under cash and carry rules. Pay up front, no credit, transport on British ships. Gold on the barrelhead. Britain's reserves were rapidly drained. In a top-secret operation known as Operation Fish, billions in gold and securities were loaded onto ships and sent to Canada for safekeeping. It was the largest transfer of physical wealth in history, but it was only the beginning of Britain's financial unraveling. By late 1940, the British Treasury was effectively empty. Contracts for planes, tanks, and ammunition sat unsigned. The empire's lifeblood, its money, was gone. Roosevelt received Churchill's letter and understood the stakes. If Britain fell, the United States would likely follow. Yet politically, the landscape in Washington was treacherous. Isolationist voices were loud. Memories of World War I and the cost of foreign wars haunted Congress and the American public. Direct aid to Britain was politically impossible. Roosevelt needed a solution that appeared shrewd and businesslike, not charitable. Enter the Lend-Lease Act. Publicly, it was sold as a neighborly gesture. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you lend him a hose. But in reality, it was a financial masterstroke of unparalleled leverage. The Americans demanded full disclosure of every British asset in the United States. Nothing could be hidden. Nothing could be spared. British negotiators argued, resisted, and delayed, but the U.S. Treasury held all the leverage. Assets were liquidated, companies sold at fire sale prices, and every penny went to immediate survival. The sale of the American Viscose Corporation became a bitter symbol. A British-owned industrial generating millions in profits, it was sold for a fraction of its true value under immense pressure. Britain had no choice. The empire was being stripped bare to survive. Strategic concessions followed. Britain needed destroyers to defend convoys across the Atlantic. The U.S. supplied them, but not freely. In exchange, Britain handed over 99-year leases on key naval and air bases from Newfoundland to the Caribbean. A century of strategic control, exchanged for ships barely seaworthy. Britain was winning militarily, but losing economically. The most insidious blow came in Article 7 of the Lend-Lease Agreement. The British imperial preference system, which protected trade within the empire, had to be dismantled. Britain was opening its markets to American goods. Slowly, silently, the empire's financial independence was eroded. As 1941 became 1942, America officially entered the war after Pearl Harbor. Industrial production in the U.S. skyrocketed, churning out tanks, aircraft, radios, and consumer goods. British factories, entirely devoted to war production, could not export. American companies moved into markets across Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Britain fought for survival while its commercial future was quietly purchased at a discount. By 1944, the financial transfer was nearly complete. Gold reserves had moved to Fort Knox. Britain's post-war debt and Lend-Lease obligations cemented U.S. economic dominance. And yet the humiliation continued. After the war, aid was abruptly cut. Britain faced a loan with strict commercial terms. Sterling convertibility forced the pound into global markets, triggering a financial hemorrhage. Overnight, Britain lost hundreds of millions of dollars. Military victory had come at the cost of financial sovereignty. On August 15, 1945, Britain celebrated VJ Day. Crowds flooded the streets, bonfires blazed, and people danced, oblivious to the quiet economic catastrophe that had begun. John Maynard Keynes, Britain's greatest economic mind, watched helplessly as the empire's wealth and influence were siphoned away. He fought, pleaded, and warned, but the Americans held all the leverage. The winter of 1947 brought the harsh reality of austerity. Coal froze in stockpiles, factories shuttered, food became scarce. Britain had survived militarily, but the nation was bankrupt. The Anglo-American loan, structured as a commercial debt, would last for decades. For 60 years, British taxpayers paid for the survival of their own country, finally clearing the debt in 2006. The moral is stark. Wars can have winners and losers on the battlefield, but the financial consequences often tell a different story. Germany was physically destroyed, Britain survived militarily, yet economically, the true victor of World War II was the United States. Through strategic leverage, loans, and asset acquisition, America gained wealth, influence, and markets without firing a single shot. Churchill had saved the world from tyranny, but, in doing so, he signed the empire's financial death warrant. Britain emerged morally triumphant, yet economically broken. Victory came at a price, paid in gold, assets, and decades of debt. The story of Britain's post-war decline is a lesson in finance, leverage, and the hidden costs of survival. Winning battles does not always mean winning the war. Sometimes, empires fall silently, in the streets, in the skies, but on the balance sheet.